Hi guys, this is Miss Paraso, and this is your video on angle review. So I'm going to go through all the things you should have learned last year about angles just to make sure we're all starting this unit on the same page. So of course you should be adding this to a new section in your notebook and adding it to your table of contents. So go ahead and pause the video while you take care of that. Alright, here we go. First of all, in your notebook, get this written down. There are 5 basic kind of angles, and I'm going to go through each of these 5 to remind you. So get these written down, and then we will switch to the next slide to explain each of them. Pause if you need some time to write them down. First up, acute angles. Those are the really cute little tiny angles. Okay, those are the ones that are less than 90 degrees. So let me draw some examples. You could have one that looked like this. You could have a tiny little one that looked like that. You could even have one that looks like this. And you might say, but that looks like a right angle. And what if I told you, nope, it's actually 89 degrees. So as long as it is less than 90, it is acute angle. Now, in contrast to that are obtuse angles that are greater than 90. So an example would look like this. So right here, maybe I could say that's 120 degrees. Or maybe it looks like this. And I say that's 165 degrees. So angles that are greater than 90. Next up, right angles. Those are the ones right in the middle. So they look like this, like the corner of your paper. And this little box in the middle indicates that it is a right angle. So if you see a marking such as that right there, that tells you that it is a right angle. Next up, straight angles. Might sound weird because how could something that is straight be an angle? But they look like this. So you see a vertex in the middle, and then I could see 2 other letters here. So we could call this angle BAC, and you might say, but that's a line. But since I said it was angle BAC, that's just an angle that has 180 degrees. Okay, so imagine if I were to draw a line right down the middle of this, it will become 2 90-degree angles. So let me show you what I mean. So here's a straight angle, and I put BAC. If I draw a line straight in the middle, and then I go like this, now I have 2 90-degree angles. So if I put a letter on here, let's just say K, then I could say these are 2 90-degree angles that are just right next to each other. So angle BAK equals 90 degrees. And angle KAC equals 90 degrees. And then if I add those 2 angles together, right? So angle BAC plus angle KAC equals 180 degrees. So you can see that a straight line can be called a straight angle as long as you put some points on it and say that the point in the middle is the vertex. Alright, so moving back up here. Okay, so next a reflex angle. So a reflex angle could look like this. And you might say, but that looks like an obtuse angle, and I would say, well, I mean this part of the angle. Okay, so let's say that the angle over here is 120, so we know all the way around is 360. So if I did 360 minus 120, then the angle I'm talking about, I'll color that in blue, the angle I'm talking about is this part here, which is 240 degrees. So the 120 is an obtuse angle, but the part I'm talking about is the 240 degree reflexive angle. So let me give you another example. I could do like this, but the reflexive angle is this part, which I could say this has an angle of 300 and let's say 20 degrees. Okay, so that's a reflexive angle. Think it's kind of like the other part of an obtuse or an acute angle. All right, so next is complementary angles. So this might be new to you, I'm not really sure. So either way, add it into your notes. So a complementary angles are two angles that equal 90 degrees. So when you add their measures together, they equal 90 degrees. Okay, so an example could be if I drew a 90-degree angle, so I know I'm starting with 90, and I'll call this A, and I'll put a point B and put a point C, and let's say this was 90 to start out with, but then I draw a line down the middle, and I'll call this D, so angle BAD and angle DAC are complementary. So I'm talking about BAD plus DAC are complementary because together they equal 90 degrees. And the reason I know they equal 90 degrees is because I started with a 90-degree angle and I cut it in half. However, this would also work if I just had two completely separate angles and I said, all right, this angle is 80 degrees and we'll call this angle M, and this angle, that's probably a bad example there. Okay, so, and then this angle here is 10 degrees and we'll call this K. So angle M plus angle K equals 90, so M and K are complementary. All right, last up, supplementary angles. So supplementary angles are two angles that equal 180. So in some ways, it's like a straight line divided into two angles. So you know that the straight line is 180. So then if I split this into two parts and I say like this is 40 and this one is 140, these two angles are supplementary. So in order to be supplementary, they don't necessarily have to make a line. You could just have two separate angles. So I could say this angle, we'll call this angle Q, and we'll say this one has a measure of 95. And then I could say another angle over here has a measure of, let's say this has a measure of 85, and we'll call this one P. So angle P plus angle Q, together their measures equal 180 degrees, so P and Q are supplementary. So just one last note about naming angles. Some angles are simple and they just have one vertex. So, well, they all have one vertex, but let's say I said A, B, C. If there's no confusion, I can just call this angle B because there's no confusion about what angle I'm talking about. However, what if I had this angle, which is completely possible. So let's say this is still B. I've got A, C, D, and F. Now, if I said angle B, which angle am I talking about? Am I talking about the straight angle? I mean, there's so many different angles I could refer to. So I have to name them by 3 points, and the vertex is always in the middle. It's always the middle point I name. Okay, so, for example, let me just draw this in pink here. If I wanted to say this angle, the one I just said in pink, I couldn't just say angle B because angle B is lots of angles. I would say A, B, D, or I could say D, B, A. So notice that in both of them, B is in the middle, but I'm saying A, B, D, or D, B, A. Okay, now, let's say I wanted to refer to, this angle over here, okay? So I'm talking about this part. So I could call that angle DBF or angle FBD. Notice again, B is in the middle, but because I said DBF, we knew I was talking about from this point to this point to this point. So therefore I meant that part of the angle. So it's very important that you name with 3 points whenever there might be any confusion. If there's no confusion, we know that I'm only talking about angle B up here because there's only one angle. But whenever there might be confusion, make sure you name it by 3 points. All right, this is the end, and hope you learned a lot about angles.